The lawyer cleared his throat, slid his glasses higher, and read my father's last will and testament in a voice that made every syllable feel heavier than paper. To my son, Mark, I leave the sum of $1. The room tilted just slightly like an old boat taking on water. My half-brother smirked into his sleeve. My aunt squeezed her purse so hard the clasp clicked. I stared at the single bill resting on the mahogany table, a prop in a joke that wasn't funny. $1. A lifetime of weekends at the shop, emergency. Airport runs, hospital, overnights bargained, down to a tip. The executor coughed. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. Somewhere in the hall, the air conditioner rattled like distant applause. I felt the heat rise then settle. The last time, my father called me ungrateful. I promised myself I'd stop arguing and start documenting. Bank transfers, timesheets, repair invoices, text threads. The night I paid his deductible because the card declined every unglamorous receipt of real life. Please turn to the next page. My attorney said quietly. The room shifted again, the kind of shift you feel before a storm breaks. Pages rustled, a smirk faded. And for the first time that morning, I wasn't embarrassed. I was ready. People think the dollar was the insult. Wasn't. It was a summary brutal, efficient of a story that started long before a probate room and a mahogany table. My father built a small construction firm with the kind of stubbornness that either makes you successful or impossible to live with. In his world, love was a currency paid in labor. Praise was rare, silence was standard, and mistakes were debts you worked off in weekends. When I was 16, he started taking me to job sites on Saturdays. You want to be a man, he'd say, handing me gloves. Show up. I showed up. In August heat, in January wind, after finals, after breakups. I learned to read blueprints, bid spreadsheets, and my father's moods. Then came the remarriage. A quiet courthouse ceremony, a reception at the country club. 2 new step-siblings. Tyler, a year older than me, and Paige, 3 years younger. Both glossy with the kind of ease that comes from being celebrated by default. We tried, all of us, to act like a family. But the rules of the game were invisible and immediate. Tyler networked. I pitched in. Paige pursued her passions. I handled what needed handling. It wasn't outright cruelty, it was calibration. If Tyler stopped by the office for 30 minutes and posted a photo with Dad, it was investing in the brand. If I stayed 3 hours to reconcile vendor statements after the bookkeeper quit, it was just doing what's necessary. Paige's gallery opening was a family milestone. My industry certification was useful. On holidays, my father told stories about Tyler's charisma and Paige's eye for design. My stories were about the time Mark helped fix the payroll hiccup without saying. I fronted the difference so direct deposits wouldn't bounce. I kept records for myself. At first, a spreadsheet titled School plus Work with Hours logged at the shop, notes about who I called, what I fixed. Then folders, PDFs of texts asking for rides, screenshots of bank transfers labeled temporary, photos of the shop inventory. I counted after a leak ruined the storage room. I wasn't planning a case. I was trying to preserve my own memory against the family's version. The year before Dad died, everything sharpened. He had a health scare and overnight stay that turned into a week. I slept in the chair by his bed for 3 nights, then rotated with my aunt so I could make it to morning site checks. I handled insurance calls, chased claim numbers, and paid his copay on my card when the desk couldn't locate the HSA. When he was discharged, I built him a medication schedule and stuck it to the fridge with a magnet from the tire shop. He peeled it off the next day. "I'm not an invalid," he said, and crumpled the paper. I took the copy from my pocket folder and taped it up again after he went to bed. Meanwhile, the business numbers started telling a different story. Vendor balances that didn't match deliveries. A new marketing vendor with invoices that felt to clean. Cash withdrawals from the operating account within hours of Tyler's client lunches. When I asked our CPA for the year-to-date general ledger, she forwarded a sanitized report and a separate terse message from her personal email. Ask your father about Brightline Media LLC. I flagged it and filed it under questions. Boundaries were my supposed sin. The more I drew them, the more it looked like rebellion. When I declined to co-sign a lease for Tyler's short term just to show income stability, I became ungrateful. When I refused to front cash for a rush marketing opportunity, I was negative. When I told my father I wouldn't work off the clock anymore, no more Sunday emergency runs unless they were on timesheets, he said, I'd changed. I was learning the difference between helping and being used. We tried family dinners. They turned into tribunals with dessert. You're always so serious, Paige would say, as if spreadsheets were a personality flaw. My stepmother made peace offerings holiday cards that listed everyone's achievements with mine, phrased like bullet points on a chore chart. Paige curated 2 shows. Tyler secured 3 brand partnerships. Mark assisted with year-end tasks. I stopped correcting them. I started saving them. The last conversation I had with my father without lawyers involved ended the way most of ours did, quietly, with a door. He'd called a strategy session, which was code for Mark, fix this. Payroll had been delayed because the operating account was temporarily tight. I showed him the timeline and the transfers, the cash pulls that mapped to Tyler's expense weekends and the marketing vendor that linked to Paige's Friends LLC. He stared at the page, then at me. You think I don't know what's going on in my own business, he said, low and flat. I think you know exactly what's going on, I replied. And I think you're calling it loyalty. 2 weeks later, he removed my admin access to reduce confusion. A month after that, he revised his will. So why the dollar? Because in his ledger, gratitude looked like compliance. 'Cause I stopped playing the role that made other people's lives easier. 'Cause the story told at Sunday dinners had me cast as the dependable background, not the sun. The dollar was a note in the margin. Ungrateful. The next page, whatever it held, would show whether he'd written that verdict in ink or left room for the truth. Recorded in my folders, dates, amounts, names, and the quiet, unglamorous work he taught me to do I did while everyone else posed for pictures. The final year didn't arrive with a blowout fight. It arrived like a slow leak, quiet, constant, impossible to ignore once you heard the hiss. It started with restructuring. My father called it a maturity move. Tyler would own the vision, Paige would own the brand, and I would own the operations, without signature authority. Keeps us agile, he said, sliding a revised org chart across the conference table. My name was still there, just missing the keys that made the job real. When I asked about admin access to banking and payroll tools I'd used for 4 years, he said, less confusion if Tyler consolidates. Then IT disabled my login at 5:12 p.m. I documented the TISTHAM P. The next week. The family CPA stopped replying to my work email. From her personal account, she sent one line. I'm being asked to route questions through the new finance lead, Tyler. Attached was a cropped screenshot from the GL showing a vendor I'd never approved. Brightline Media, LLC. The memo line on several payments matched dates of Paige's shows. The total across 3 months, $38,400. I filed it under conflicts. And waiting, turned into erosion. My access badge stopped working after 7 p.m. overtime policy, HR said, though the shop had never had one. My Sunday site checks were reassigned to a contractor whose report I eventually saw 3 bullet points and a stock photo of a ladder. When I flagged quality issues with a slab pour, Tyler told me, we're not in the weeds anymore, Mark. Big picture. Took photos of the cold joint and CC'd Dad. Silence dot boundaries dash the ones I'd learned to state without apology became ammo. When I declined to front a rush payment for Brightline because the PO was unsigned, I was accused of stonewalling growth. When I asked for vendor W-9 South before approving new payees, Paige rolled her eyes. He wants to play accountant. Now, I didn't want to play anything. I wanted a business to run like a business. The night the lesson on gratitude became explicit, Dad called me to his office after hours. The blinds were half closed, the kind of leftover light that makes dust look like weather. He held a letter my email to the CPA asking for full-year vendor detail. "You went around your brother," he said. I told him I went through the process that protected his company. He tapped my name on the org chart. Process is what I say it is. I felt that old heat, then the new calm that comes with having a record. "Then we should write it down," I said. "Policies, controls, sign-offs. If the brand is going to pay Paige's friends, the brand should disclose it." He stared at me long enough to make the second hand audible. "You sound like an auditor," he said. "Or a son who doesn't." "Want to be the bank?" I answered. Two things happened after that. HR updated roles, removing financial approvals from my job description. And my father stopped replying to my texts unless they were logistics 7 a.m. site. Call vendor. The man who once taught me to double knot rebar ties stopped talking to me about anything that required agreement. We became project managers sharing a last name. By summer, the business numbers were no longer a puzzle. They were a picture. Operating. Cash smoothing someone else's lifestyle. Marketing invoices, laundering favors. Client dinners that lined up with deposits into an account one digit off from Tyler's personal card. I brought what I had to my attorney, Jennifer. "You don't have standing to audit unless you're an officer or shareholder," she said, flipping through my tabs. "But if this flows into the estate, probate will." She looked up. "Document the dates. Don't confront. Don't warn. Just keep your copy." Dad's health dipped again in August fluid in the lungs, a quiet room filled with beeping grammar. I brought him a charger, stood in the doorway while he slept, and stared at the man who taught me to carry weight with my hands, not my voice. This is where tidy stories invent reconciliations. We didn't get one. He woke, saw me, and said, "You don't have to stay." I sat anyway, counted drips in the IV, and paid the parking machine when I left because the card reader glitched. I kept the receipt. He came home. The strategy meetings resumed without me. A month later, the bookkeeper mentioned, too casually, that there had been a quick stop by the lawyers baiting some paperwork. I wrote the date down. Without letting my face move, the last time Dad and I spoke alone, he stood in the shop doorway watching me chalk a plumb line. "You keep records like you expect a fight," he said. I snapped the string and watched the line appear clean and true across the concrete. "No," I said. "I keep records like I respect the work." 2 weeks after that, he signed the will. That left me $1. And somewhere in that same folder, the one my lawyer slid across a mahogany table, he left the next page. "Please turn to the next page," my attorney repeated. And the executor's thumb hesitated on the corner like it had weight. "This is a codicil," he announced, voice tightening. Executed 6 weeks after the will. Paper slid. Chairs creaked. The room drew in. He read, "Notwithstanding the specific bequests above, I establish the Whitaker Trust No. 2. The trustees shall distribute the residue of my estate according to the following condition. The child who demonstrates, by verifiable documentation, material contribution to my business or personal welfare in the 5 years preceding my death shall receive the controlling distribution described herein. Contribution includes, but is not limited to, unpaid labor, financial advances and essential care or logistics performed in good faith, My half-brother's smirk cracked. My mother shifted. The executor continued. For the avoidance of doubt, any executor or beneficiary found to have diverted or concealed estate or business assets shall be disqualified from distribution and removed from fiduciary roles. The trustee may rely on independent forensic accounting and sworn statements. It is my intent to reward duty over display. He turned another page. Appointment of independent trustee, Harbor and Lane Fiduciary Services. Not my stepmother. Not Tyler. Not anyone who owed a holiday. Invitation to my father's golf partners. The codicil got more precise the further it went. The way my father always got more careful around dangerous tools. The trustee shall request a payroll and vendor ledgers for the prior 60 months. B-Bank statements, including merchant services and cash withdrawal logs. C. Documentation of any loans or advances made by my children to me, my spouse, or my business. D. Affidavits from third parties with direct knowledge of care, transport, or emergency logistics provided. My attorney's hand rested flat on the table, a quiet, steady. The executor cleared his throat. There is an interpretive letter attached. He unfolded a single page. My father's block script reproduced in black and white. Letter of intent. If you are reading this, I am not here to explain what should be obvious on ledgers and calendars. I love my children differently because they are different. I have not always loved them fairly. I know who shows up. I also know the difference between a post and a receipt. Do not argue intent. Follow the paper. If there is nothing to hide, nothing will be hidden. Silence is loud when people are recalculating. I watched the math happen on faces. The $1 wasn't a period. It was a test strip. The next page was the reagent. The trust instructions set deadlines like project milestones. 30 days to produce records. 45 to complete an independent review. 10 to contest findings with documentary evidence only. No character witnesses. No speeches. Numbers or nothing. Tyler spoke first. This is insane. Dad never. He stopped, eyes catching the signature initials at the bottom of each codicil page. R.W. 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 The man who initialed every change order twice, once for the file, and once for the lesson. My lawyer slid a slim folder to the trustee's representative. Preliminary submission, she said. Bank transfers labeled temporary. Timesheets, mileage logs, ER copay receipt, affidavits from the foreman. The night charge nurse, the aunt who rotated care. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. The executor read the final paragraph. Any beneficiary who impedes the trustee's access to records or attempts to alter, destroy, or fabricate documentation shall be deemed to have disclaimed their interest. The trustee is authorized to petition the court for removal of any executor who fails their duty of candor. The air conditioner kicked on. Somewhere outside, a delivery truck downshifted. Inside, the room had already changed shape. My father had left me $1 on page 1. On page 2, he'd left me a language I spoke fluently. Dates, amounts, shores, signatures, and a simple instruction that sounded exactly like him when he was at his fairest. Follow the paper. The codicil didn't hand me an inheritance. It handed me homework with a deadline, and for the first time in months, I was working to my strengths. Jennifer set up a war room on my dining table. Banker boxers, tabbed binders, sticky flags, color-coded. Like a traffic plan, we treat this like discovery, she said. Independent, trustee or not, assume scrutiny. She assigned buckets: contributions, money, time, care, hospital, transport. Business, unpaid labor, approvals, and communications. Texts, emails, proving who asked for what, when. I started with money, the easiest to prove. For my bank exports, I pulled every transfer to my father, stepmother, or the company. I matched each to a screenshot of the request. Can you cover the HSA? I'll reimburse Friday. Urgent vendor check printer down. Short on. A deposit can you spot $600 till Monday. Each line got a cover sheet, date, amount, purpose, whether repayment ever happened. Out of $14,870 advanced over 5 years. The repaid column totaled $0. I printed the copay receipt and stapled it to the text from the admissions clerk. Card declined. We can try another. Under it, I taped my bank alert showing the debit at 8:41 p.m. time was messier but just as real. I exported calendar entries and location history, site checks on Sundays, night runs to the supplier, 2 a.m. pharmacy pickups during Dad's pneumonia. Week, my foreman's affidavit filled in details. Mark was present on 41 weekend site visits in the last 2 years, often alone. He identified defects that prevented rework costs. I attached photos from my phone cold joints, mistied rebar, mislabeled bundles each with metadata stamped and cross-referenced to the reports I'd emailed. Care fell into a rhythm. Discharge summaries with my signature as family contact. Parking receipts with timestamps matching nurse station calls. The medication schedule I drafted and taped, plus the note I made when Dad peeled it off. My aunt's sworn statement. Covered our rotation dates, hours at bedside, who took nights, who handled morning rounds. The night charge nurse, Ms. Ellison. Provided a brief note on hospital letterhead. Family member Mark Whitaker. Present during medication reconciliation and discharge education on 0217, 0218, and 0220. Participated appropriately. Business and labor was the spine. I printed 4 years of timesheets and highlighted off. The clock entries I'd sent to myself by email as a paper trail when payroll couldn't accept overtime. I attached the IT ticket logs showing my admin access removal and the HR role update that scrubbed approvals from my job description after I questioned vendor payments. The shop's inventory photos after the storage leak got their own subsection. I paired them with the late-night supply order and the 6 a.m. delivery receipt. Material contribution wasn't a feeling, it was a ledger of labor. Communications proved intent. I assembled a timeline of texts and emails that showed who initiated requests and how repayment or recognition evaporated. Tyler's front. I'll square you Friday lived beside a bank line that never squared. Pages, can you get Dad to sign this vendor form? Sat next to the Brightline invoice stamped PAID without a W-9. I didn't editorialize. I indexed. Jennifer brought in a forensic CPA, Andrea Lim, to translate my piles into patterns trustees and judges respect. Andrea requested full bank statements from the company and estate. While we waited, she built a shadow ledger from what I had. You're not imagining this, she said, pencil tapping. There's a cash flow smoothing behavior, here personal or side expenses absorbed by operating cash. Your advances are patching holes. She created exhibits, a graph of my transfers aligned to vendor payments. A calendar overlay of hospital dates with my transactions. A table of marketing PEs cross-referenced to social posts featuring Pages events. We also drafted requests to Harbor and Lane, 60-month vendor ledgers, cash withdrawal logs, merchant services, statements, and the full contract. Trail for Brightline Media LLC, the trustee's associate. A precise woman named Alvarez acknowledged receipt and crucially copied the executor and all beneficiaries. No backdoors. Predictably, the pushback started. The executor's office sent a politely chippy email about burdensome requests. Jennifer responded with a paragraph from the codicil authorizing independent forensic accounting, followed by a deadline countdown. Day 12 of 30. Tyler texted in bluster, "You're making this ugly." I replied with a single sentence, "Please direct estate matters to counsel." Then I saved the thread. On day 9, Andrea flagged something with the tired excitement of a person finding the missing puzzle edge. Look at these ATM withdrawals on Fridays. Then cash deposits into a personal account ending 4,321 on Mondays, she said, drawing a line. The routing overlaps with dates of bright line invoices and your advances. The trustee gets full statements, we can test it. While the trustee chased records, we fortified affidavits. The ex-bookkeeper, Layla, agreed to a sworn statement after Jennifer assured her we'd limit it to facts at Mr. Whitaker's direction. I was told to route questions about new vendors to Tyler. Brightline Media LLC was added without standard. W9. When I requested documentation, I was told, marketing handles it. We packaged everything with an index that would make a librarian proud. Binder A, contributions. Binder B, care. Binder C, business. Binder D, communications. Each entry had a tab number, each tab had a cross-reference. Each cross-reference circled back to the codicil's language, verifiable documentation. Material contribution, good faith. On day 14, Harbor and Lane confirmed the production schedule for company ledgers and estate statements and set the independent review date. The clock didn't scare me anymore. Deadlines, definitions, documents. My father had finally chosen a battlefield where I wasn't outnumbered. By stories, I was armed with paper. Harbor and Lane moved like engineers, quiet, methodical, allergic to drama. Their first letter to the executor read like a parts list, bank statements, vendor ledgers, payroll journals, cash withdrawal logs. Merchant services, signed contracts. For all marketing and branding vendors, and the estate's asset inventory. Deadline, 30 days. They CC'd every beneficiary and our counsel, which meant stonewalling would be public by design. Stonewalling arrived anyway, dressed in politeness. The executor replied that retrieving historical records may be burdensome during a time of family grief and proposed a 90-day extension. Jennifer's response quoted the codicil verbatim, then added a single line. The trustee's schedule stands. Day 6. The executor sent partial PDF cropped statements. Month ranges that started mid-cycle, vendor lists without EINs. Andrea, our forensic CPA, opened a spreadsheet and started filling the gaps with what we already had. There. Plain keep away, she said, but the pattern leaks through. Outside the paper, the pressure campaign returned, wearing family faces. My stepmother called twice, then switched to a long text about how your father wanted us together, not at each other's throats. Tyler tried PR. Bro, if you back off the codicil demands, we can figure out a side arrangement, he wrote, as if the trust were a group chat. Paige posted a soft focus story about choosing love over litigation tagged with a quote about forgiveness. The subtext wasn't subtle. Jennifer reminded me, no replies. Everything through counsel. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and taped our timeline to the wall. Court entered the chat on day 12. Harbor and Lane petitioned probate for an order compelling production and, in the alternative, removal of the executor for failure of candor. The motion was all spine. Specific pages missing. Altered pagination. Metadata suggesting PDFs were exported from edited spreadsheets. It included Andrea's declaration, cool as ice. In my professional opinion, the provided records are incomplete and selectively produced. The hearing set for day 21, the night before that hearing. Anxiety spiked like a bad EKG. Sleep came in shallow loops. I did what had worked all year. I made a list. Witnesses prepped, exhibits labeled, affidavits notarized. I texted my mentor from the engineering firm, Rodriguez, who once taught me the job site rule. Measure twice, pour once. He replied at 2:11 a.m., you've measured. Let the pour set. I put my phone down and breathed in 4s until morning. Probate court was fluorescent and unromantic. Judge Patel wore the particular patience of someone who has listened to a lifetime of family mythologies. Harbor and Lane's attorney, a steady woman named Alvarez, the same associate from the letters presented first. The codicil authorizes. Independent review. We can't review what we don't have. Jennifer rose next to support with Andrea's declaration and our index. The executor's counsel objected to the tone. Argued that minor gaps shouldn't derail the grieving process and implied we were weaponizing paperwork. Judge Patel looked over his glasses. Paperwork is how we administer estates, he said, then read the codicil language out loud. He granted the motion to compel in full, denied the 90-day extension, and added a footnote that landed like a small earthquake. If complete records are not produced by the deadline, the court will entertain removal of the executor for cause and referral for further inquiry. He set compliance for day 30. The executor's jaw flexed. Tyler stared at the table. The media nibble started, then small-town reporters who smell a probate fight like rain. A blog ran with disinherited son invokes receipts clause. I declined interviews. Paige didn't. She painted a portrait of a grieving family under attack by technicalities. It got 100 heart emojis and 3 comments from people who had hired the company and remembered me showing up on Sundays. I screenshotted those and filed them under context, then closed the browser. Therapy became non-negotiable oxygen. Dr. Walsh named what was happening extinction. Bursts escalations that occur when a system loses control. They will alternate guilt, anger, and charm, she said. You respond with boundaries, facts, and silence. She wrote a general letter for my HR file, documenting stress impacts and recommending flexible hours around hearings. My supervisor signed off on adjusted schedules without hesitation. Wins don't always look like rulings. Sometimes they're a manager saying, handle what you need to. Your work speaks for itself. Day 19, records finally arrived, this time in bulk. Merchant statements, bank PDFs, vendor ledgers with real EINs. Andrea and I dove in. Patterns emerged like bruises. Friday, ATM withdrawals in round numbers. Monday, cash deposits into an account, ending 4-3-1. Brightline media invoices coinciding with large brand experience. Charges at venues where Paige's shows were hosted. A second consultant vendor, North Shore Creative, routing to an address that a quick registry search tied to. Tyler's girlfriend's apartment, Andrea drafted a preliminary report for the trustee. Findings suggest diversion of business. ASS/ETS for personal use via affiliated vendors. The timing of cash withdrawals aligns with personal deposits. The plaintiff's documented advances coincide with periods of operating account strain, indicating reliance on his funds to bridge gaps created by said diversions. It was dry and devastating. Day 23. A grenade rolled into our inbox. The executor accused us of defamation by insinuation. Jennifer replied with a single exhibit. The codicil's clause disqualifying anyone who impedes the trustee or attempts to conceal records, followed by 8 pages of citations to the newly produced ledgers. She ended with, "We prefer numbers." 2 adjectives. Meanwhile, family texts oscillated. My stepmother, "Can we talk like humans?" Tyler, "You're going to regret making this public." Paige, a single broken heart emoji. I stayed with the script. Please direct estate matters to counsel. Silence is loud. It also scales. On day 27, Harbor and Lane scheduled witness interviews. The ex-bookkeeper, Layla, confirmed vendor onboarding shortcuts and recalled being told it's Dad's call. The foreman, Ruiz, testified to my weekend site visits and documented corrections that prevented rework. Ms. Ellison, the night charge nurse, verified my presence during discharge education. None of them editorialized. They didn't need to. The hearing on compliance Day 3rd was short. Alvarez summarized production gaps, filled and gaps that remained. Andrea testified to the patterns without saying fraud, which judges appreciate. Jennifer tied it to the codicil's trigger. Duty over display, contribution over performance. The judge praised the trustee's diligence, found the executor marginally compliant after court intervention, and this matter authorized the trustee to retain a forensic auditor at the estate's expense. He set a status date and warned any further obstruction will be met with removal. Walking out, I exhaled for the first time in a month. The hallway smelled like coffee and copier toner. Jennifer squeezed my shoulder. "This is what momentum feels like," she said. "It's not glamorous, but it's real." That night won. Went home, watered the plant I kept forgetting, and stared at the binders filling my dining table. Anxiety still hummed, but underneath it, something steadier had formed. They could spin stories. The court couldn't hear them. It could only hear. Paper. Andrea's audit didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived in a 37-page PDF that smelled like toner and inevitability. Harbor and Lane had greenlit the deeper dive, and Andrea treated the estate like a system with inputs, outputs, and losses. "We're going to follow friction," she said, tapping the first exhibit. "Money leaves trails unless someone's very good." They weren't. Exhibit A mapped Friday cash withdrawals in round numbers: $600, $800, $1,200 against Monday. Cash deposits into a personal account ending 4,321. The lines overlapped like train tracks. "This pattern is characteristic of bleed," Andrea wrote. Operating cash displaced and reappearing as personal liquidity. She didn't accuse, she described. Judges love verbs that don't posture. Exhibit B aggregated marketing vendors over 60 months. Brightline Media LLC billed $128,400 across 18 invoices. All paid within 48 hours, unusual for a company that kept its electricians waiting. Net 45. North Shore Creative billed $61,900 across 11 invoices. Registry checks tied Brightline to a mailbox store suite. North Shore traced to a residential unit, later confirmed as Tyler's girlfriend's previous address. Related party indicators, Andrea labeled it, which is accountant for I'm. Not saying it, but I am. Exhibit C was my least favorite because it turned my life into a graph. It overlaid my advances to Dad, the business with operating account dips. Every spike in my temporary transfers corresponded to a preceding drain, via cash or marketing. My money had been the sandbag when the river crested. Plaintiffs' documented advances appeared to bridge operating shortfalls correlated to related party expenditures, Andrea concluded. Reading it, I felt both vindicated and used in fluorescent color. Then the ledger got teeth. Andrea requested merchant data and found 4 client dinner charges at Mirador, a restaurant that didn't have a private dining room but did have a DJ on Fridays. The dates matched Brightline invoice, periods, and Page's public gallery openings. Business development looked a lot like personal events with corporate cover. She pulled the company's mileage logs on a hunch and found entries for site visits recorded at the same time my GPS put me on those sites. Duplicate credit, operational work attributed to non-performing parties, she wrote. Clean, lethal. The emails, Harbor and Lane pried loose, told the story in plain English. One from the bookkeeper months before she resigned. Need. W-9 for Brightline. Can't cut without. Tyler's response, run it as promo. Dad said it's fine. Another thread had my father copying both of us. Mark, please ensure payroll makes Friday. Tyler, reimburse your expenses through the proper channel. Under it, a reply from Tyler never sent, drafted and saved. It's all one family pot. People forget, drafts survive. The trustee didn't. Tucked near the back was a thing that made my throat get small. A letter from my father to the CPA, time-stamped 2 weeks after the health scare. Addendum: if anything happens to me, please ensure the books reflect actual work performed and advances repaid. I have allowed appearances to substitute for substance. Correct it? It wasn't notarized. Not a formal instruction, just an email print. But it read like the start of a man trying to square his own ledger. Harper and Lane scheduled a forensic interview with Tyler and the executor. The conference room was glass and quiet. Recordings clicked on. Everyone swore. Alvarez stayed polite. Andrea stayed boring on purpose. Who approved Brightline? Marketing, Tyler said. Define marketing, Andrea replied. Brand growth, he said, eyes flicking to the glass. Who is the principal of Brightline? Silence. Do you know? Andrea asked. A vendor, he said, finally. Do you have a W-9? It's somewhere. We don't have it, Alvarez said. Notes scratched. He pivoted to grievance. Dad wanted us to elevate the brand. Andrea returned to the river, and the cash withdrawals, why Fridays? Vendor preferences, he said. Which vendors? Small ones. Names? I'd have to check. The executor. Fared worse. Alvarez walked him through the codicil's duty of candor clause. Then showed him metadata proving PDFs had been exported from spreadsheets edited the week after the court's compel order. He flushed high on the neck. We were organizing, he said. The court prefers native statements, Alvarez replied. The trustee prefers candor. Layla's sworn interview was the opposite of dramatic. I asked for documentation. I was told, it's handled. She described being instructed to route questions through Tyler, the removal of my admin, and the day she found a stack of prepaid Visa cards funded from operating cash for pop-up activations. She photographed the cards. Andrea matched one to a charge at Mirador on a gallery night. The foreman, Ruiz, testified to outcomes. Rework avoided because of my Sunday checks. Vendor credits secured because I caught missed deliveries. The slab we rejected that would have cost $12,000 to break out later. Mark did the work, he said, eyes steady. He didn't post about it. Ellison, the night charge nurse, was brief. He was present. Asked appropriate questions, transported the patient safely. I didn't realize how much I needed a stranger to say I had shown up until my eyes burned over a transcript by the time Andrea finished her supplemental report. The narrative was less family drama and more system leakage. Her recommendation to Harper and Lane was careful, given related party indicators, incomplete documentation, and production irregularities. I recommend disqualifying fiduciaries who impeded review and recalculating distributions per the codicils. Contribution standard. That night, I opened the box where I kept Dad's old chalk line. I pulled it tight across my kitchen table edge and snapped it. The blue dust settled in a straight band over wood grain and paper tabs. He had known something was off. He hadn't said it out loud. He left a way to say it for him. Probate calendars don't look like justice. They look like folding chairs, beige walls, and a docket that runs 20 minutes late. But when our case was called and we filed into Department 3, the air changed like a warehouse door opening. To whether you'd been hearing but not feeling. Judge. Patel reviewed the stack in front of him. Harper and Lane's independent report, Andrea's forensics, Layla's and Ruiz's sworn statements, Ms. Ellison's note, and the executor's compliance. Filings with their uneasy metadata halos. He lifted the codicil, turned it once, then read its spine aloud. It is my intent to reward duty over display. He looked up. We'll proceed in 3 parts. Trustee findings, testimony, and application of the codicil. Alvarez, steady. As a metronome summarized the trustee's review. 60 months of ledgers, bank statements, merchant data, and vendor contracts were examined. We identified patterns. 1 cash withdrawals from operating accounts matched to cash deposits in a personal account. 2 marketing vendors, Brightline Media LLC and North Shore Creative, appear affiliated with beneficiaries. 3 operational. Work documented by the plaintiff aligns with cost avoidance and care contributions. She did not speculate. She pointed, and the exhibits did the speaking. Andrea testified next. The world's calmest thunder. These are not conclusions of criminal conduct. They are accounting observations. When we align Friday cash withdrawals with Monday deposits into account ending 4,321, we see temporal correlation. When we cross-reference Brightline and North Shore with registry and address data, we note related party indicators. When we overlay the plaintiff's advances against operating shortfalls, his funds bridge gaps coinciding with non-operational expenditures. She paused long enough for silence to do its job. In my professional opinion, the plaintiff has provided verifiable documentation of material contributions in the 5 years preceding decedent's death. Jennifer stood with the small smile of someone who knows not to gild a beam that's load-bearing. Your Honor, the codicil is not a character contest. It sets an evidentiary standard, verifiable documentation of material contribution. We've met it, tab by tab. She tapped the binders. As to the trustee's separate concern impediments to review, the codicil disqualifies any fiduciary or beneficiary who diverts or conceals assets or impedes access. The executor's counsel pivoted to feelings. This is a grieving family, and my clients deny any intent to misuse funds. Marketing spend is subjective. Cash withdrawals are routine for small vendors. Any production gaps were inadvertent. More importantly, the decedent left Mr. Whitaker $1. Intent is clear. Judge Patel lifted the codicil again. Intent is in this document as much as the will, he said. And here it is, operationalized, not sentimentalized. Witnesses followed like rivets setting into steel. Layla, the former bookkeeper, repeated what she'd sworn. I requested W-9 South. I was told marketing handles it. I was instructed to route questions through Tyler. Ruiz testified, jaw square. Mark's weekend checks prevented rework and secured credits. He did the work. Ms. Ellison was crisp. Mark attended discharge education, transported the patient, and participated appropriately. None of them performed. They reported, then came Tyler. He took the stand with a smile that aimed for charm and landed on defensive. We invested in brand, he said. Brightline did activations. North Shore did strategy. Jennifer slid the vendor registry prints to the clerk. Is this North Shore's address? Tyler shifted. Looks like it. Is this your girlfriend's former residence? At one time, he said, color rising. So a related party. It's not like that. Do you have executed contracts? W-9 South. Somewhere. The trustee requested them. We're still looking. And the Friday cash withdrawals. Small vendors prefer cash. Names? I'd need to check. But you haven't provided names. Silence. The executor fared no better. Alvarez walked him through metadata, showing PDFs exported from edited spreadsheets after the court's compel order. Why? Were native statements not produced? We were organizing. By editing, we needed to redact personal information. Bank statements are routinely produced with standard redaction. These display altered pagination and modified fields. He swallowed. We were trying to be thorough. The court prefers candor, Judge Patel murmured. Not quite under his breath. Jennifer closed with the codicil itself, the way a carpenter closes with a level. This instrument isn't ambiguous. It tells the trustee to follow documents and reward contributions that can be proven. It tells the court to disqualify those who divert or conceal. My client's evidence is receipts, ledgers, miles, minutes. At a hospital bedside, opposing parties offer adjectives. She rested her hand on binder A. He didn't ask this court to like him. He asked it to read. Judge Patel took his time. He read the letter of intent, my father's line about knowing the difference between a post and a receipt. He read Andrea's charts, the Friday-Monday bleed, the vendor affiliations. He read Ms. Ellison's letter twice, as if weighing the lightness of its language against the heaviness of what it meant. Then he set the stack down. The decedent anticipated precisely this dispute, he began. He created a conditional trust with an objective standard, verifiable documentation of material contributions. The trustee's review is credible. The plaintiff's submissions meet the standard. The opposing party's explanations are inconsistent with produced records. He turned to the executor. The court finds the executor marginally compliant only after court intervention and not credible in explaining altered productions. Pursuant to the codicil and the probate code, the executor is removed for cause. A murmur went through the room like wind under a door. Harbor and Lane will continue as independent trustee. A forensic auditor is authorized at the estate's expense. Then the part that changed the math of a family. As to distribution, the codicil's condition is satisfied as to the plaintiff. The trustee is directed to allocate controlling distribution to Mr. Mark Whitaker, consistent with the trust's terms, subject to final accounting. Any beneficiary who impeded review or participated in diversion is disqualified from distribution pending the trustee's determinations. He looked at Tyler. This includes parties tied to related party. Vendors identified in the forensic report. Tyler stood too fast. His chair skidded. "This is a setup," he said. His counsel pulled his sleeve. Judge Patel's gaze was steady. "It is an accounting," he said. "You may submit documentary objections within 10 days. The order hit the clerk's desk with a stamp that sounded louder than it should have. Alvarez exhaled through her nose, the smallest victory tell I'd ever seen. Jennifer squeezed my elbow once, then started writing a to-do list in the margin of the minute order because that's who she is. After. In the hallway, the building smelled like copier heat and coffee someone had forgotten. My stepmother stared at the wall directory, not seeing it. Paige's face had the shell-shocked blank of a person whose story of herself had met a ledger. Tyler was already on his phone, texting fury into a screen. No one looked at me. That was fine. I wasn't there for eye contact. I was there because a man who knew how to pour a straight slab had given me one last job. Follow the paper outside. The day was ordinary, the kind of blue you only see in cities that pretend they don't have weather. I walked to the parking lot with a photocopy of the order in my bag and passed a contractor's truck with mud on the tires and a coil of rebar strapped down tight. For the first time since the will reading, the ground under me felt plumb. The codicil wasn't a trick, it was a tool. And in the right hands, tools make things true. The order did not feel like a windfall. It felt like a checklist. Harbor and Lane issued a post-hearing schedule that read like a project plan. Finalize forensic audit 21 days. Calculate controlling distribution per codicil 30 days. File interim. Accounting with court 45 days. Initiate transfers upon court acknowledgement 60 days. Alvarez asked for one more round of documents. Titles, deeds, beneficiary designations, business operating agreements, and any side letters my father might have stashed with the CPA. I spent a Saturday in my aunt's attic, opening boxes that smelled like dust and WD-40. At the bottom of one, under a coil of survey tape, I found a manila folder labeled Succession Draft. Inside, an unsigned buy-sell template. My dad's notes and block caps needs funding mechanism insurance lapsed, and a bullet that made my chest tighten. Markups continuity. Tie authority to deliverables, not birthdays. Trustee's final audit didn't bother with adjectives. It assigned numbers. Related party vendors totaled $190,300 across 60 months. Cash bleed approximated $68,400. My documented advances and cost avoidance. Contributions were quantified in a way only accountants can. $14,870 advanced. $23,600 in prevented rework. $7,200 in negotiated vendor credits. $1,040 in hospital logistics. This quantification is not exhaustive, Andrea wrote, but sufficient to establish material contribution. Harbor and Lane's recommendation followed. Disqualify Tyler and Page from distributions related to the diverted assets, remove the former executor permanently, and allocate controlling distribution to me under the codicil. On day 34, the court acknowledged the trustee's accounting without objection. Tyler filed a late context statement heavy on grievance and light on exhibits. The clerk stamped it received, and the judge stamped it read. The order stood. Distribution was less cinematic than people imagine. No champagne, no keys tossed. In the air. A title company emailed closing documents for the house. I signed and returned them electronically. The deed updated 3 days later. I got a PDF, then a paper copy by certified mail with a green card I signed in my doorway. The company's operating agreement required amendments. I became the managing member with authority tied to specific financial controls, dual signature thresholds. W-9 enforcement, monthly reconciliations that must be reviewed by an external CPA. We executed the changes in a conference room that smelled like dry erase and coffee. I brought a new binder labeled Controls. Harbor and Lane split the estate's liquid remainder. First, a reserve for taxes and the auditor. Next, repayment. To me, for documented advances. Then the codicil's controlling distribution. No one applauded. The wire hit my account with the sterile note estate distribution trust too. I moved a chunk into a boring index fund and a chunk into business reserves. I paid off my car. I bought a lockable file cabinet that wasn't from a garage sale. The house was not a trophy. It was an old, stubborn structure with good bones and deferred maintenance. The first weekend, I walked room to room with a yellow pad making lists. Roof flashing, fascia rot, a front step that tipped just enough to catch your toe. In the garage, my father's tools hung in imperfect symmetry hammer outlines stenciled on plywood from a younger version of him who believed in systems even if he didn't always follow them. I found his chalk line and hung it at eye level. The ladder creaked the same way it had when I was 16. I did not move in. Not at first. Grief is a worker that clocks in whether it's invited or not. I hired an inspector, then subcontractors for what I couldn't do alone. I showed up with coffee at 6:45 a.m., swept sawdust at lunch, and labeled change orders with dates and initials. It felt like honoring something I could respect about him. Work done square, paid on time, documented family, did what families do. When their story has been edited by a court, some rewrote, some resisted, some went quiet. My stepmother called from a number I didn't recognize. Her voice was small. "I'm trying to understand how we got here," she said. I told her I hoped she would, and that I would talk with her with a trustee present or in therapy. But not to relitigate the order, she cried. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only sentence that never collapsed on me this year. I'm going to follow the paper. We agreed to start with a meeting at Harbor, and Lane, she didn't show. Page posted a carousel about healing through art that included a photo of a ledger with flowers on it. I didn't engage. Months later, she sent a message at 1:12 a.m. I'm sorry for calling you negative. Didn't understand money was a language. I typed and deleted responses until I landed on, I'm open to a conversation with a mediator. She replied with a heart. We haven't scheduled it yet. Tyler. threatened appeals, then discovered appeals require records and law, not fumes. He fired off 2 emails with subject lines in all caps, and then, as far as I can tell, pivoted to a new venture with a new LLC and the same fonts. Harbor and Lane's disqualification of his share from the diverted asset pool became final. He learned what I learned months earlier. The court doesn't read feelings. Work, the kind that paid my rent while probate ate my time, steadied me. My supervisor, Rodriguez, called me into a glass office and slid a new title across the desk. Operations. Lead compliance. "You already do this," he said. "Now do it on paper." The raise wasn't wild, but it was honest. I built checklists. I wrote policies other people could follow. I cared in a way that didn't drain me. In the house my father's then. The estates, now Minai, carved out a small room with morning light and made it a workshop. I mounted a whiteboard on one wall and wrote 3 lines: measure twice, pour once. Initial the change on the opposite wall. I framed a single paragraph from the codicil: reward duty over display. It did not absolve him. It did not make him a saint. It acknowledged the part of him that knew how to tell the truth in the only language he trusted. When the roofers finished, I climbed up the last afternoon and walked the ridge with the foreman, checking, flashing, and vents. The city stretched out like a grid your eye could follow. I thought about all the times I had tried to get love by doing more. By being indispensable, by making myself the sandbag against other people's floods. The court had not loved me. It had recognized me. There is a difference, and it is enough. To build on, I sold 2 pieces of equipment the business no longer needed and used the proceeds. To seat a scholarship at the trade school, my father respected more than he admitted. The criteria were simple: show up, learn, and keep a clean log. We named it after him because names can be reclaimed by what they fund. The first night I slept in the house. The refrigerator hummed and the water heater clicked like a tired metronome. I lay awake longer than I wanted, then got up and walked to the garage. I pulled the chalk line, stretched it across the workbench, and snapped. Blue dust lifted and settled. A straight mark where there hadn't been one. The story people tell about me has changed in other people's mouths without my help. That's fine. My job isn't to feed it. My job is to keep building things that stay true when you measure them. People still ask about the $1. They say it like a punchline. Your dad left you $1. I used to feel the heat climb my neck when I heard that. Now I shrug. The dollar wasn't the meaning. It was the misdirection. The lesson lived. On the next page, here's what I learned, written the way my father would have wanted plain. With numbers where possible and no performances where they don't belong. First, documentation isn't drama. It's memory with proof. I didn't win a feeling in court. I satisfied a condition. Receipts, ledgers, timestamps, signatures, unromantic things that outlast mood and myth. I did not become more worthy because a judge signed an order. I became legible to a system that only recognizes what can be verified. That distinction hurt at first. Then it set me free. Second, boundaries are not punishments. They are load-bearing lines. I spent years thinking love meant covering gaps without asking why they existed. The day I stopped fronting cash and demanded W-9 South, I wasn't betraying a family. I was respecting a business. People who benefit from blur call clarity cruelty. They'll get loud. Let them. The point of a level is not to please the carpenter, it's to make the thing true. Third, intent matters, but structure wins. My father loved all of us, and not always fairly. He could be generous and blind in the same sentence. When he finally understood that appearances had been standing in for substance, he didn't write a poem. He wrote a codicil. He built a leverage system that turned a lifetime of show-up into an instrument. Reward duty, follow paper, disqualify concealment. It didn't fix everything he broke. It did point the force of his values in a direction that produced truth. Instead of fog, fourth, justice is not the same as reconciliation. Courtrooms do not repair families. They sort assets according to rules. That sorting can create conditions where better conversations are possible, or it can confirm the end, if a story that needed to end. Both outcomes are honest. I wanted an apology I could frame. What I got was a distribution I could audit and a silence I could live with. On some days, that feels thin. On most days, it feels like oxygen. Fifth, grief and gratitude can share a bench. I miss the man who taught me to set string lines and check forms with my boot. I do not miss the version of me who believed respect was earned by carrying everyone else's weight without complaint. When I hang a level on a new wall or initial a change order on a job, I feel both sadness and relief. Sadness for what he couldn't say while he was here, relief that he left a way to say it after. For anyone staring at a lopsided ledger with your name buried in the margins, here's the part that might help. Write everything down. Times, dates, amounts, who asked, who approved. What changed? Keep copies somewhere no one else can organize for you. Read every page. Wills have codicils, contracts have exhibits, policies have procedures. Power hides in the attachments. Don't argue with stories. Produce records. Systems don't hear adjectives. When you set a boundary, expect an extinction burst, guilt, rage, charm. Stay with your line. Quiet is a tool. If you're scared that asking for fairness will destroy the family, test the foundation. If a relationship collapses under the weight of clarity, it wasn't carrying its share to begin with. The people who love you will adjust. The people who loved the free labor will call you ungrateful. Let them use their words. You use your ledger. The dollar sits in a shadow box on my workshop wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that headlines lie by omission. Under it, I framed one sentence from the codicil. It is my intent to reward duty over display. When I'm tempted to explain myself to people committed to misunderstanding me, I look at that line and choose a different task. Sweep the floor. Label the bin. Measure twice. My father left me a test disguised as an insult. I passed it by behaving the way he taught me on the days he was at his best. Show up. Do the work. Write it down. Sign your name. Read every page. Then, build something that stays true when someone else comes with a tape.